Me, I ain't never gonna understand. This is the story of the Strokes last night.
You know the songs.
Just making people feel something.
It's been a pleasure to work on this song with her.
But do you know the history?
It's a struggle making any kind of record.
I don't always have the direction or concept.
This is Encore, an in-depth look at the stories behind the music. Here's iHeartRadio's Ruby Carr.
Ah yes, the Strokes, music's coolest the band of the early 21st century. What's a the band, you ask?
Listen, the reason I called you guys in here, your name, Sum 41, the number band thing is out, okay? Blink 182, Green Day 75, these names are not cool. What's in now is the, okay? Yeah. The Strokes, I can't see you, the Vines, the Hives, the White Stripes. This isn't new. Yeah. The Led Zeppelins, right? Are you feeling me? Guys, check this out. The Sums.
Okay.
The Sums. What's in now is drinking your beer and smoke. You guys smoke?
No.
Yeah, you do now. You like that? Smoke them up, Johnny. What's your name?
Darren.
Not anymore, it isn't. It's Sven. You like it? It's great.
Yes. I don't know.
It's great.
Yes, that was Canada's Will Sasso in a skit that aired before Sum 41's 2002 single Still Waiting, in which Will hilariously breaks down exactly what a the band is. Honestly, it was played as satire at the time, but looking back on it 25 years later, folks, I mean, where's the lie? Anyway, along with Sweden's The Hives, Australia's The Vines, and Detroit's The White Stripes, the Strokes almost certainly had no intention of getting looped into the phenomenon of wispy-haired indie rock bands that all seemed to break out between the summers of 2001 and 2002. Because if we're being honest, they didn't exactly have what you might call an indie origin story. Formed in New York City in as early as 1997 by frontman Julian Casablancas, guitarist Nick Valensi, and drummer Fabrizio Moretti at the illustrious Dwight Private School, which lists Truman, Capote, and Paris Hilton as alumni. The trio would quickly recruit friend Nikolai Fraiture to play bass with them, as well as guitarist Albert Hammond Jr. in '98. Hammond Jr. was the son of Albert Hammond Sr., a successful singer-songwriter who had written for Tina Turner, Celine Dion, and Diana Ross, to name a few. And Jr. had just relocated to New York from Los Angeles by way of Switzerland, where he was childhood friends with Julian Casablancas at, you guessed it, an even more illustrious private boarding school. Slightly different than my public school, although we did take a field trip to an old-timey village once, so fancy. The boys would tell much.
We were all friends. That's pretty much what brought us together, like as a band, like our personalities. Before we started playing music with each other, we were just sort of school buddies.
Mm-hmm. Were you like outsiders or insiders, or what was the deal?
We weren't outsiders, but we weren't insiders. I don't know. I don't think people didn't really pay too much attention to us in school, I don't think.
The boarding school five would christen themselves the Strokes, and like many bands we've profiled here on Encore, dedicated themselves to practicing and performing across New York City tirelessly. Here's Nick Valensi breaking it all down.
Like, I met Julian in school, and I met Fab at the same time, and like Albert knew Julian from before that. They had gone to school in Switzerland together, and Nikolai as well had gone to school with Julian when they were younger kids, and we just like sort of started playing music, like not even seriously, like, you know, for a long time we weren't even like a real band. We would just sort of hang out and like play songs in each other's bedrooms.
The Strokes' official first ever show under their now famous moniker was on September 14th, 1999, and became fixtures at New York City rock clubs Luna Lounge and the Mercury Lounge. Of course, it wasn't long before ambitious industry types started to take notice of the Strokes. A booker at Mercury Lounge quit to become the band's manager soon after meeting them. And following a show at Luna Lounge in 2000, producer Gordon Raphael offered to produce a demo EP for them. Armed with about 14 road-tested songs to choose from, the Strokes and Raphael produced the Modern Age EP in late 2000. Included on that EP were just 3 songs, The Modern Age, Last Night, and Barely Legal. From there, the Strokes made the peculiar decision to send their EP to UK label Rough Trade Records. As they would tell Much's Suk-Yin Lee, it wasn't entirely a decision born out of market savviness.
You, in the early period of the band, you made the demo and sent it off to Britain, first of all, and that's where you were signed in Britain. But why was it important to you to send stuff over to England?
It wasn't. Just, we sent it everywhere, and they just the first to respond.
Oh, really?
It wasn't like I sent it to Rough Trade. I didn't even know Rough Trade was.
It was sort of on a whim, I think, that our manager sent it. He wasn't even really our manager at the time. He was just like doing us sort of like a couple of favors. Like heard through someone that this guy in England would like it, and he just sent it sort of on a whim. And like it was Jeff Travis from Rough Trade Records. He called back, released it.
We actually haven't signed with them yet, so.
Oh, you haven't?
No, it's all in good faith.
The label loved the Strokes' unapologetic, rough around the edges, garage punk style, and began a good faith working relationship with the band. Remember, this was a time in music where, at least in North America, the drop D guitar stylings of nu metal and rap rock were filling up the airwaves. So the band's sound was truly a breath of fresh air to a UK audience who never really got on board with the brash stylings of American bands Limp Bizkit, Korn, and their contemporaries. A sentiment that Nick and Albert Hammond Jr. explained to Music Plus.
So why is it that the whiny British bands are being accepted in the US and the happy party bands are being accepted in the UK, but they're from the US?
I don't know. I guess just different youth, different tastes. I don't know. Music in America right now is like a little bit weird, sort of at a weird point, I think. And it seems like the music in Britain is just sort of like getting away from that whole like sort of like pop, like nu metal type thing, and sort of going to like more, I don't know, like different kinds of sounds. And maybe America and Canada are not far behind, you know?
I don't think Canada and America are on the same kind of wave like music.
Probably. I wouldn't know, you know, I don't like spend that much time in Canada. I'm like, no offense, like it's a beautiful place, but I mean like I'm from America, you know? So
as we were all still in the very early days of digital downloads as a legitimate way to consume music, Rough Trade partnered with UK music mag NME to give away a free download of the EP's standout song, Last Night. The original EP version of Last Night, released in the UK in the early weeks of 2001, is, as you might expect, not quite as slick and polished as the fully produced version we all know and love. Sounding a bit more like a live off-the-floor band vibing out in, you know, the coolest bar you've ever been to in your life, the production is thinner and tinnier, but the toe-tapping bravado of the bouncing guitars and Casablancas' raspy, earwormy refrain of Last Night remain faithful. As expected, the UK audience absolutely ate the track up. Even before the boys had a chance to record a proper LP, the Strokes were being touted as the saviors of American rock and roll. A month-long tour of the UK only solidified this notion, with whispers getting back to America that these guys were the real deal.
it got to a point like when we recorded that Modern Age, like 3 songs, like we felt like we had like finally done something that was like pretty good and like sort of like worth like releasing and showing to people. And from that point on, it was just like fast, like you know, I didn't even keep track. Like the past like year has just been overwhelming.
In true too cool for school fashion, though, the Strokes would seemingly insist that all of their success was a sort of natural order of things and give the UK audience less credit than you'd think for the hype leading to their success.
Well, like England has been always sort of supporters of eccentricity and originality. Do you think that?
And crap. No, I'm sorry.
Do you think so?
Well, I mean, like, it's not like their music scene is like that much superior. You know what I mean? They just, I think they pick up on like they always want like the new like rock thing, you know. So it was sort of easy for them to like digest us. But I hope there's more to it than that in our future, you know.
It seemed like they're hungry for something that was like didn't fit into what was going on there as well. A lot of people have been like raving about the band, and I came across this quote from Graham Cox of Blur, who said that that he hopes that the Strokes will save pop music. I mean, how do you respond to like this type of pressure to save pop music?
Send flowers, cookies sometimes. A nice little letter, a little thank you, you know.
By the time the Strokes returned to American shores to play South by Southwest, they sparked one of the largest major label bidding wars for a band in years. Eventually, they would sign with Sony's historic RCA Records and begin plotting their major label debut. Despite having the RCA mega machine behind them, the Strokes scrapped their label-arranged sessions with famed Pixies producer Gil Norton, calling the songs that they worked on with him too clean and too pretentious. The band instead opted to stay faithful to the production stylings of the still unknown Gordon Raphael and would begin working on their album Is This It? In March of 2001 at New York City's Transporterarium, or as MTV Europe's Joe D'Angelo would call it, a basement on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Raphael would tell publication Sound on Sound that despite the fact that RCA had technically agreed to let the band continue to work with him, they were none too happy about it, saying, having RCA America, a major label, coming to see the Strokes recording in a basement with Gordon Raphael, the untested producer, was a very eye-opening and interesting process. From the get-go, they wanted it out of my hands. They did not like the sound of the EP, and they did not think the album was going to be professional enough. They were very worried. Julian had the A&R guy come down and play him the material on a boombox. I watched the A&R smile and put his arm around the band members, and he shook my hand and said, "Good job." But I felt the vibe of, oh, what are we going to do now? How are we going to get this turned around, right? I could feel that from the moment we met. In any case, the relationship remained cautiously sustainable between RCA, Raphael, and the Strokes until the final mastering stages. And it's a good thing, too. Raphael was dealing with the threat of eviction from his basement studio in the early sessions. But with RCA finally on board, those money issues magically went away. Inspired by the gritty, non-conformist sound and feel of the bands like Velvet Underground, the Ramones, and Iggy Pop and the Stooges, the Strokes wanted to limit the amount of studio effects used on Is This It to maintain a feeling of authenticity. Or, as Raphael would go on record to say, Julian and Hammond Jr. specifically had hoped that the album would sound like if a band from the past came to the future to record an album. In his biography of the band, This Is It, not to be confused with Is This It, writer Martin Roach notes that only overdriving amplifiers, distortion, and reverse echo effects were used on the band's instruments, and that the miking of the drums was intentionally sparse so as to not pick up any excess sounds from the guitars and bass. The guitar setup was similarly straightforward with amps on either side of the studio, recorded with no extra equalization. Somewhere that A&R rep was losing his mind, no doubt. Casablancas sang through a tiny PV practice amp, a particularly genius move that gave his already growly vocals an even more lo-fi feel. The Strokes would complete Is This It by April of 2001, but made the decision to go on a promotional world tour before the album was released, staggering each territory's release to sync up with where in the world the Strokes were on their tour. Cool idea. I don't think it would work now, though. Australia got the album at the end of July. The UK was next at the end of August to coincide with the band's Reading and Leeds festival appearances, while North America would have to wait a little longer, but we'll get to that. With the EP version of Last Night already technically out, the band made the decision to lead with a lesser-known track, Hard to Explain, as the lead promotional single, complete with a music video directed by one of the band's friends. Of course, that friend was Roman Coppola, the son of legendary director Francis Ford Coppola and older brother to the iconic filmmaker Sofia Coppola. But hey, if you've got a Coppola on speed dial. While Hard to Explain is a perfectly fine song in its own right, and definitely a well-fitting piece of the puzzle that is This It?, I'd hazard a guess that if It was the only single released, we might not be doing this episode of Encore right now. Although in hindsight, the band may have been looking to temper expectations by releasing a single that was slightly less of a sure thing. Because the groundswell of hype was so overwhelming for the Strokes, specifically in the UK, where they'd already won over the hearts and minds of an adoring fan base pre-album release and had done a fair amount of high-profile interviews, the still barely in their 20s Strokes had begun to gain a little bit of a reputation as, well, dicks. Here's what they told the one and only Nardwuar in the summer of '01 as North America waited on bated breath for their turn to revel in the full Strokes experience.
Just the way we've been portrayed, is not us. And if I heard of a band like that, I probably wouldn't like that band. I think they were assholes. I don't know. I think the way to hear music is to hear the music first and then find out about the band later. And it's so over-sensationalized that any asshole with a pen can just take up your time and fucking portray you in a it's not that it's a bad way, it's just not the truth. And it's a shame that people aren't hearing the music and then appreciating it, and instead they're just being fed some bullshit. But
you're getting paranoid about it. Like you walk into Carlos and Bud's here and people are yelling and you think they're yelling at you.
No, not at all. I think it's not that. It's just that you gotta understand, we've had a schedule that's so packed with stuff that we didn't organize, but we're gonna sort of I think take it by the helm a little bit and sort of make sure that we can function as a band and write new songs and get better and not be I feel like so many bands, I never realized what it was, but I feel like so many bands got all this success that's that hasn't happened yet, but if it does that, it sucks. It's
Originally, the album was set to release on September 25th in North America, perfectly timed with a homecoming tour of the East Coast. But the tragic events of 9/11 delayed the album by a few weeks, while the band and label made moves to replace mildly controversial track New York City Cops with a new song, When It Started.
You guys had written the song New York City Cops, and you had to push the album because of the release of the album, because you decided to take that particular song off. Why was that?
Well, I think obviously the song has nothing to do. It's written way before. I think it bothered me. Yeah, I think it just bothered me that that the meaning would be not heard, and people that had never heard the song, it would have a totally different ring. That was a cool song. I just think it's bad timing, just the wrong time. So
another well-documented change was the album's cover image. So original versions of the album featured a suggestive ghost white photo of a woman's lower torso with her hand draped in a leather glove placed along the curve of her hip. Deemed too sexually explicit, the cover in the US features a photo of subatomic particle tracks in a bubble chamber. While the original was ostensibly a collector's item at first, both versions were made available everywhere on vinyl over the years, and many streaming services feature the original to this day. Finally, after months of hype, Last Night was released as the Strokes' second single on October 23rd, 2001. The video, directed by, say it with me now, Roman Coppola, actually features a third version of the track, something you rarely see, an actual live on-set version of the song. The Strokes explained to MTV it was their one stipulation to make a video for the song at all, actually.
We actually didn't want to make a video for a really long time, and just now that I think our album is coming out, and we thought if we could just play the song live, and they actually let us do that, so it changed our mind, because there's not going to be a flashy video, typical MTV video. I think it's just going to be us playing the song live in a funny environment. It's going to almost be a show for people on their couch
It's probably for that reason that the video for Last Night is very simple and very Strokesy. A straight-up performance video shot on what looks like, a variety show set right out of the 1970s. A listless and doe-eyed Julian Casablancas singing while he half-heartedly rolls through frontman stage cliches like launching his mic stand across the set and chugging a beer before throwing the microphone down to the ground when he finishes singing. Other than a brief blip on a map that also appears in the Hard to Explain video, that's pretty much it. As for the song itself, it didn't take long for critics to notice a striking sonic similarity to another hit single, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' 1977 hit, American Girl. Yes, if you listen closely, you'll hear the similarities between the songs, specifically the tempo, percussion, and even the guitar sound. The vocal melodies are, of course, wildly different, but there's a pretty strong resemblance otherwise. Hilariously, the Strokes had no problem freely admitting their quote-unquote inspiration from that Petty hit, with Casablancas later noting, "People would say, that song American Girl by Tom Petty, don't you think it sounds a bit like that?" And I'd be like, yeah, we ripped it off. Where have you been? Luckily for the Strokes, Petty didn't seem to mind all that much, telling Rolling Stone in 2006, "The Strokes took American Girl for Last Night. There was an interview that took place with them where they actually admitted it. That made me laugh out loud. I was like, okay, good for you. It doesn't bother me." In hindsight, though, the Strokes really got lucky. Tom Petty would not be so benevolent to Sam Smith when he sniffed out the similarities between their 2014 hit Stay With Me and his song Won't Back Down. His publishing company would eventually shake Smith down for a 12.5% writing credit for Petty and Jeff Lynne. Damn, Tom, that sure is petty. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Eventually, the prophecy came true for the Strokes, and Last Night, and Is This It itself, ushered in a new golden age of indie rock and roll that you could argue we're still feeling the effects of some 25 years later. Ostensibly a hipster-esque breakup song about a failing casual relationship where the two people just can't seem to get on the same wavelength, Last Night includes not only the aforementioned primal roar of the refrain, but a very fun to sing along with chorus about the people who just don't understand. To clarify, that includes people, obviously, girlfriends, grandsons, spaceships, and me. I ain't ever gonna understand. Critics adored the song and the album, with Rolling Stone literally calling the record the stuff of which legends are made. The band's friends, critics at NME, gave Is This It a 10 out of 10 review, with writer John Robinson calling it one of the best debuts by a guitar band in 20 years. Pitchfork, in a 9.1 rating, hilariously stated, "Are they really that good? Of fucking course not," while otherwise giving them kudos for their relentless melodies, saying, "The instant gratification of solid driving rhythms while maintaining strong but simple hooks that seem somehow familiar yet wholly original, all while reminding us that the band are not deities." But it certainly felt like they were. The Strokes became the dictionary definition of the coolest band you've never heard of, even though they were so cool, everyone had heard of them. When researching for this episode, our writers recalled the Strokes' second ever visit to Toronto for a tiny show at the Horseshoe Tavern in October of 2001, located just east of Spadina on Queen Street. Fans queued up for hours in a line that spanned over 2 blocks just for a chance to get inside to see the band. Considering the capacity is about 350 to 400 people at a stretch at that venue, that is a packed house. Much as Sookie and Lee was on site just before that show to ask them what it was like being the saviors of pop music.
Well, yeah, what are we saving pop from? What's going on in pop music that needs to be saved?
I don't think we're saving pop. I think those kind of quotes. I hear that stuff all the time. I think people they need to I think the thing is that people want hope because there's so much crap going on, and they see the way big business runs everything. So there's obviously a lot of frustration. So you want to say things like that, but I think it's it's what we're doing is a little different than just trying to, like, you know, restore like the music industry or anything like that. I think we're just trying to put out something that has a positive effect, and in time, you know, like, you know, different things will happen from it. But like, it's not a time to like predict, at least for us.
By the time 2001 closed out, Is This It was named the best album of the entire year by Billboard, Entertainment Weekly, NME, and Time, to name a few, as well as obtaining high rankings in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, and USA Today. BBC Radio's Zane Lowe, now of Apple Music fame, called the album a masterpiece, saying that it essentially redefined the template for rock and roll for the modern day, forcing labels to actually look for hot new rock bands to sign. Rolling Stone agreed. In 2009, they ranked Is This It as the second best album of the 2000s. In 2020, they upped the ante by calling it the 114th best album of all time, before inducting it as the 10th best album of the 21st century so far at the beginning of the year, putting them in the company of fellow top tenors like Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Kendrick Lamar, and Radiohead. So, are you taking notes? There will be a quiz. Amidst all the accolades, the Strokes fundamentally stayed true to themselves artistically, which, to be honest, meant there wasn't exactly an overwhelming commercial boom for Last Night or Is This It. The album would peak at number 33 on the Billboard 200 and has only been a platinum-selling record in America for about a decade and a half. Last Night entered the top 5 on the U.S. modern rock charts in late 2001, didn't break through to the Hot 100, and actually wouldn't even go platinum until 2021 as a single with the inclusion of digital streams. Also in 2021, some 20 years after its release, Rolling Stone would proclaim Last Night the 155th best song of all time in a companion list to the aforementioned Albums Guide. The Strokes would release one more single from Is This It, the underrated Someday, before returning in 2003 with Is This It's perfect companion album, Room on Fire. No longer music's best-kept secret, Room on Fire was also critically acclaimed and still divides opinion between the most hardcore of Strokes fans on which album is better. You can start arguing about that now, with the BBC even giving it the dubious distinction of an acclaimed album that nobody listens to anymore in 2018. The Strokes would go on to put out one last record in the 2000s, 05's heavier First Impressions of Earth, before taking an extended hiatus for the rest of the decade. In that time, Julian Casablancas would release one solo album, Phrases for the Young. The band would return in 2011 with the cult favorite Angles, an album which initially sparked rumors of infighting within the band when it was whispered that Julian and the rest of the band actually wrote the music and lyrics and melodies separate from each other, causing a myriad of issues for all involved. Casablancas has since denied that that was the case, for what it's worth. Angles would be followed by 2013's Come Down Machine, another cult favorite. It would be promoted sparsely and perform poorly. 2016's Future Present Past EP would keep the band afloat as they mostly performed festival dates to close out the 2010s. In the meantime, Casablancas would form a new band called The Voids, with the stated goal of representing things unseen and exploring music from the margins, purposely positioning themselves as a band that is uninterested in mainstream attention. The Strokes look to return to form when they hooked up with the band whisperer Rick Rubin for their first full length in 7 years, 2020's The New Abnormal. The album turned out to be quite aptly named, and the band wouldn't really be able to tour the record properly until well into 2022, because of COVID. I'm sure they were home baking sourdough like the rest of us. Reflecting on the music of the Strokes, Casablancas would tell the Times in 2020, "For me, the first 2 records were one creative enterprise, but by the time the 3rd record came out, there were other issues going on. I liked a lot of modern classical music. That was where my mind was at, but it crashed with all the rock cliches of the touring and the drinking and infighting and the bullshit. Hitting the sweet spot between edgy and catchy is the goal in everything I do, and Is This It is always what you're aiming for." With the band now comfortably all in their 40s, you might not be surprised to hear that Casablancas has remarked several times over the past few years that he's kind of overperforming Last Night. I hate when bands do that. It made you famous, it made you tons of money. I don't feel bad for you. Play the song. In fact, play it twice, because that's why we're talking about it. It's the encore. In that same interview with The Times in 2020, Julian would also note, when you start playing 30 or 40 shows, the music doesn't move you. You feel phony. To some extent, that's why I play with voids. I couldn't care less about playing Last Night. I'm a human animal and a prisoner of the crowd's reaction on a biological level. I don't want to care, but if people like it, it feels better than if people hate a song. Late last year, he even doubled down, telling The Guardian, "Last Night by The Strokes is pretty dead to me. I'm not sure why. If I heard it on the radio, I'd probably turn it off." Well, this is awkward. I was just about to cue it up for you, too. I'm Ruby Carr, and that was the story of The Strokes Last Night. Thank you so much for listening. Now make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can drop us a review with what songs you'd like us to cover in a future episode.
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Download the free iHeartRadio app and subscribe.
Thank you so much for coming.